Why do you think that asset information modeling is really important into a project? Is really a need into it, and why?
I suppose from the discussion that we had before and preparing for this even earlier today, George, it was I didn't really understand the question because I'm quite lucky. I've got to work internationally. I've worked all over Europe and Asia, and a lot of them are big national projects, work on infrastructure projects, and the asset information is absolutely key. It's a key deliverable. So to me, it didn't make sense that it wouldn't be seen as that. But I guess they're mature markets. They know what they're looking for from their asset information, and they're looking for a high quality data set. And then this is where it leads into what we're doing with the Red Sea Development Company. Is we want that high quality data set to help us, well, to enable us to make better decisions around investment, around feasibility, around funding. And it goes back to your point before, George. I think that's the key. If you don't really understand what it is you're trying to achieve and what the vision for your organisation is, why would you ever see any value in that asset information? And I think it's sort of quite interesting when you listen. Well, certainly today when I've been listening to a number of the conversations, it seems to be very driven by technology. It seems to be very driven by the capex stage, very driven by BIM. You know, I think it's a lot simpler than that. For us, a good asset information model could be an Excel sheet. And by following international standards, I think where we're working with some of our operators, where we're following an ISO, they're really happy with how we're getting structures. But some of the less mature organisations, where they're asking for a specific data set, we can just give them a slice of that. We don't have to tell them it's an asset information model. We don't have to tell them that it's anything clever. That they're just looking for data to make better decisions. For me, it's as simple as that.
Please, yes.
Yeah, Steve. I think just leading on that data set, if it's set at the outset, so we understand what the asset owner, manager at the end of the project is going to use, if that's set at the beginning, then we don't have to have multiple data sets and crossover, and then all of a sudden that a lot of the data that you get at the beginning from the consultants all the way into construction gets added to, gets lost, and the stuff that's put at the end is pretty useless. So if you can set it at the beginning, I think that's the way forward, really.
So Ash and Amr, do really your clients understand the meaning beside this? What do you do to show them,
650. So there is an ISO 19650 standards, which is part 3 for the asset information model. And as Steve mentioned, it captures the asset information throughout the design stages, construction, and eventually handover. In our case, when we are developing the same product over and over again, we need to learn from this. And the only way to learn from this is to capture the data. And like we have a different approach than the Red Sea. We want to capture the data within the model itself, because we need to learn from the model to influence our decisions. So we have more, it's our end product when it comes to a residential unit, it's not that complicated. So we can collect all the data in a model. It's not a mall, for example, where it becomes a little bit tricky. But for residential units, we need to capture all the information and keep evolving and keep monitoring the information lifecycle. So how it was designed, how it was executed, how it was handed over, and eventually how it is managed. So learning from this process will enhance our next product generation.
Nice. Ash?
I think I echo what everyone said. In terms of what our clients are asking for, there is certainly a lot more awareness on this. So for the giga projects now in the kingdom primarily, there are a lot of early discussions and thoughts around asset management. This is before even design is commenced. Understanding what is the asset management, how do you want to operate and maintain it later on, and how do we feed into the design. So there is a step change, and there is a level of appreciation that the asset information model that we discuss now, whilst heavily beneficial during the operation phase, but it doesn't go unnoticed during the design and construction phase. Some of the biggest challenges that they currently face is being able to have a single source of truth during design and construction. Am I looking at the right specifications? Am I looking at the right design diagrams? And if you have we live in a very global industry, so we can have a design teams in UK, US, Middle East, and Australia all working on the same design. So having that set up is absolutely critical.
Fantastic. So Stephen, from your experience now, Because here we have the full range. Yeah, we have the client, we have the design company, we have the building company. So in your end, which are the drivers that really help to have a good, if we can use this word good, asset information model?
For me, what's helped the most is getting all the parties around the table at the same time. We use River Stages a lot in the UK. I know sometimes it's used over here. River Stage 1, to understand how we're going to actually operate the facility and to understand that we have the supply chain there to operate it. So for example, if we put lots of PV solar, do we have the backup in country or the right cleaning products to go through and clean it when it's the maintenance time? We had the National Brownfield Institute, which we finished at the university a couple of months ago. We had our FM team, the mechanical, electrical, civil engineer, the architect and the contractor, all from River Stage 2, all the way through to handover. And we had a product that was operationally fantastic. We had the digital key. It was federated, so the BIM model was federated and checked, asset tagged. It was a very good project. It wasn't a massive project, but it was good. It's because of the data and the people we got involved at the beginning. I'm not sure that's answering your question entirely.
Yeah, actually now you give me some food for one question that is not here actually, in terms of the supply chain, which is actually a point of reference. It's interesting, while I was living in China, I was working there, I can see the usage of tags and RFID very well integrated, and I was really shocked to see the reaction from the factory to the production line on the construction site and then to the construction process. David, yes, I can see you want to add something.
Yep, so on the driver side, it goes back to what we discussed in the last answer, and that's around understanding what the organisation vision is or what the purpose for the organisation is. But I think that there's probably also a couple of ingredients with that. And I suppose one key one is alignment to that vision and that strategy. So again, from our perspective, or the Red Sea perspective, it's very much around environment, it's around sustainability, it's around customer experience. So it starts to clearly lay out the types of information and data that we're going to be interested in. And then I think the other ingredient that goes with it is agility. So as we as an organisation is maturing and as industries are maturing, there probably isn't a correct answer from day one. So you have to build agility in. So following an international standard, for example, is a good way to start. And knowing that depending on who you're handing over to, if they're in a mature state, they'll be ready to accept the information in that way. Whereas organisations that are less mature, you're going to have to help them along the journey. And so I suppose as a driver, well, it's not as a driver. I suppose what I'm saying is sooner or later it comes down to value. It comes down to a value discussion. So if we can get the data in early, it's cheaper. If as who you're handing over to matures, if they start to come up with data requirements at a later stage, it is going to cost more. But then I think that's where it comes down to the crux of it. It's where the money is. So you can choose then whether that's where you want to invest in or whether you're going to let those benefits go away.
Nice. Amr?
It's important to keep track of the elements from early stages and make sure that the information is captured there and it's communicated with everyone.
Good point. Early stage, very important, yeah.
So rather than like basic stuff like asset naming conventions can be agreed early in the process. Like as developers, we might have informations from previous projects. So this information can go upfront as insights for the design team. Like if you go for any shopping mall brands, they have their own history and all historical data. So they need to leverage this data early in the design phase to push for the next design projects and transferring this knowledge to the construction, because we have a say that every project is unique, but not every single equipment is unique. If you go to, let's say, handling unit manufacturers, they keep manufacturing the same unit over and over again. So you need to capture lessons learned throughout the asset lifecycle. But then this will give you privilege, like in some cases commercial privilege. So you can take early decisions, you can start procuring early. And also when you think about sustainability, it will give you a holistic view of how your future asset will perform. So you can take decisions when it will really impact the end product rather than building the asset, and then start figuring out how you are going to optimize the operation stage. So trying to simulate everything as early as possible. And this will go to the digital twin discussion when we have system of systems.
Which is actually, that goes to the previous presenter who was talking about the proactiveness.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
So you will be able to have a digital twin, like, I will not say a mature digital twin, where you can actually use the model to simulate,
Right way. Yeah.
and you have all the historical data.
Ash?
Again, a lot has been said, so I'll keep my part relatively brief. From my perspective, you talked about BIM in your presentation. Obviously, that's translated into project information models, and ultimately that's translated into asset information models. Now, what good asset information model looks like at the end is to meet all the required objectives. That's easier said than done, but that's really the bottom part of it. And I think what makes or breaks these initiatives, obviously starting early, knowing what you want, sticking to it, and so on. But of course, we all know that during design, construction phase, things tend to change. There's no reason to be bound by the initial truth that you identified in day one. As long as there is the governance in place to ensure that these changes are reflected across the deliverables, across your asset information model, then you have that consistency in place to make sure that what you receive at the end in terms of asset information model is what you're expecting to receive.
Fantastic. So that means actually the models really can learn, yeah? However, what about the people? And what about people and asset information modeling could really drive to what David said before, the sustainable development of a project? What actions shall we do in order to achieve a goal like this?
Yeah, so that sustainable development is absolutely key for us at the Red Sea, and again goes back to that vision or the strategy for the organisation. So capturing this information provides us that benchmark, as it were. So we've got that benchmark data for about our assets, and we can then use that to understand the impact that we're having on the environment around us while the asset's in operation. But going back to what Amma said, I think what's probably more exciting is that over time we're going to be able to start to measure the impact that we've had on the environment, and also measure the impact we've had on customer experience, and then using that information to then that will then inform what future developments look like. And that's great from trying to create a great asset, but then that becomes super powerful information when you go back out to the markets to go get funding or go get investment. You've got some data around how your assets are performing, but based on that benchmark. Absolutely, if that's the way your organisation is aiming to, absolutely, we'll go drive that.
Nice. Ash, what about you?
So two parts to this. You mentioned people and you mentioned sustainability. In terms of sustainability, at least from the operations and maintenance perspective, sustainability is all about increasing the life of the asset. The longer you can operate it, the more efficient your organization would be, and it's a more sustainable approach. If you need to then replace it every couple of years, obviously we know that's inefficient. And the whole idea of having the right information is to be able to make these decisions, strategic decisions and operational decisions. What is the most optimum means of intervention? When do I intervene? The latest point I can intervene before it fails. Don't do it too early, don't do it too late. And how long can I operate this without needing to replace it? These two questions provide you with a level of sustainability. In terms of people, just very quickly, I think that's a very good point. The next set of people that walk through our doors will be the millennial graduates. These are dynamic people. They've lived on social media. They have high expectations. They want to make a difference. They want to make a change. They will not tolerate repeat activities. If you're looking for data administrators to come in every day, get information, make a flashy table that will go into a report that may or may not be looked at by management, you will struggle to keep these people. I think there'll be a time where the data administrations has to be now replaced by data analytics and people who are actually providing an insight into the information and deriving value from it.
You remind me actually, when I was in China, I had a project with Ningbo Airport by digitalizing, modeling actually one of the buildings. And the director told me, George, you know something? The CEO wants the 3D full comprehensive model on his phone to make the decision. I said, yeah, okay. Will he be able really to understand the model on a phone, on a smartphone? So maybe this could link actually to our final question about the future, but I would like to listen to Stephen's and then Amber's opinion.
I think go back to the sustainability, because when we're designing projects and when we're thinking about is this master development or giga project going to work, we have to really, again, look at the equipment we're going to install. Is it the best equipment for the project, or is it because it's on a vertical cost table? We have to look horizontally. Select the equipment that's going to be the most sustainable. It may be more expensive than the others, but holistically, when you look at the whole system, including the cables, the switchgear, and all the other bits that interconnect into that, it will reduce the overall cost of the system and create a more sustainable outcome for that system. For the future, I'm hoping there's going to be a digital triplet of some sort. It's going to go a stage further where we're going to use information from satellites as well and integrate all that. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm saying a digital triplet for the future.
We keep that. Amber?
So when we are thinking about future, first of all, our assets will be for future generations. So we need to think about how they are going to use these assets. Like right now, you will no longer accept an as-built in a deteriorated paper. It's no longer accepted. So our current technologies will be no longer accepted after 20 or 30 years. So we need to have processes and we need to educate the market to develop something, and that can be future-proofed. Okay? It involves following standards, following best practice, and also educating all the new generations and the current generations to embrace the digital technologies. So you throw a question about the difference between digitization and digitalization. Okay, so right now we need to digitalize our products, our assets, so it can go inside an environment where you can have a realistic BIM model that actually reflects all the products in the market, because this will reduce the waste in the processes. You know what's there in the market, you know what's the performance criteria, etc. Then you can have an informative decision. And when people come in the future, they can interrogate why you made this decision, what was the input, and if they want to change it, they can take informed decisions.
Very nice. David?
So yeah, the future, I think it's interesting that we're seeing cycles now, and I think those cycles are different internationally as well. So if you just look at the built environment as a sector, even the industries within that are at different levels of maturity, and they're accelerating at different paces and different rates. So if you look at, say, Project 13 in the UK, where they're looking at asset information, it's very detailed, but it's sort of quite slow, whereas, say, the market here is certainly a lot quicker. But I think that you have to go through those cycles in order to sort of really understand what the benefits are going to be for you and your organisation. And I'll use Tesco, which is a supermarket in the UK, as an example. So what they did is they provided discounts to people for their grocery shopping, and they did that basically in order to get data. They did that in order to get your personal data and find out about your shopping habits. But people sort of didn't know that at the time. They just got the discount. But what that enabled them to do was to become the market leader, because they knew they could start to predict what people wanted and what they wanted to buy and when they wanted to buy it, and how to tap people into the direction of a sale. So they use data to do that. And I think we will soon see the same in our industry as well, whereas now we're starting to get a bit more data, and that is now starting to drive decisions around design, starting to drive decisions around feasibility and investment. You can see there's some organisations that are out there that are already making this play. They're not getting the benefits yet, but I think they're going to be the winners in over the next couple of cycles. And certainly within Saudi Arabia, the cycles are very quick, and they're making some big bets in there. So I think it's going to be. I think we're going to see some really interesting organisations come out the back of it from a prop tech perspective, just because they're able to go through those cycles a bit quicker.
Nice. And last one but not least.
So I think integrated services, certainly that is, it's here and now, so that's not necessarily future. It's about seamless experience from the customers. Integrated services has a significant amount of enablements behind it. On the face of it, it could be seamless behind it. There's a lot happening. And then with the introduction of big data, there will be need to have a much more intelligent way to represent and visualize the information. And you can hear digital twin. These are necessary now because the volume of data will be too much for you to comprehend using them in the traditional way. I think these are the couple of key items I mentioned about the competency needing to change to align with that. I think these are some of the key ones that I know.
Fantastic. May I have the last slide, please? Excuse me. Hello. May I have the last slide, please, that I've sent you? Thank you. So as a summary, it's going to be your summary. So we're looking forward to welcome your questions at this stage. Definitely what we saw today was really this journey to develop this sustainable development starts from the data that really impact to the factors that affect the asset information modeling operation. And therefore, we need to close the gaps, project and operations, by designing and developing more operational, functional asset information models, meaningful, that can help the decision making, the reaction, to be more proactive and to be ready to accelerate whenever an uncertain events like COVID happened.
In my prospect, data is respectful, but the thing is, people to do the analytical conclusion of the data and making sure that the gap between the data and the reality is being covered is very important. And this is, I see it in industry, Data are there, but in reality, when you go to the field, things are happening differently. Operation maintenance manual is there, but then what is going on the field is totally different world. So I need some elaboration on that.
It goes back to the process of developing the asset information model and the quality control procedure. So if you have to change something on site, what is the reason behind it? Was it a design amendment that you need to do, or there was some site conditions? And if you do that, you need to update the model. So you keep the model and the asset information model as live as the construction. So you need, the information should be connected to the project management procedures. So when you do quality checks, is it executed as per the specification? Is it executed as per the drawing? Is it reflected on the model? And as Dr. Georgios was saying, right now you can have mobile devices where you can take the model and actually look on site and see what's happening. And if there is a mismatch, it has to be aligned. By following this process, eventually, when you reach to the handover, you will have trust in the data. Right now, the industry is suffering from disconnected information, and that's why right now, at the operation stage, people do not update the current the model itself because they think it's already executed. Why we need to update the model? If we change it or replace an equipment, why we need to update the model? The model means the geometrical part of it and the attributes behind it as well.
What we've heard from you is great, to see how everybody's looking proactively from different, let's say, angle from different organizations. But I think, going back to the earlier discussion, that we sitting here in the room are actually inheriting most of the things done on the other room, construction, design. And I think going back to Muhammad's question, it's not about updating it when it's in your hand, because then we can control it. My question is, what as an industry, as what we could do to bridge between the designers, contractors, and what we have, and make sure that whatever is theory or whatever is being pitched is already in motion? Because we live in a region where, fortunate, everything is a speed, very fast. So your expectation is to make sure you get it done quick.
I think O&M-wise, getting started early is really important. And having the teams that are managing the FM or the asset management thereafter, they should be involved, again, as I said at the beginning, at the very early stages of design. And it's exactly the same point. the guys that are looking after the asset should be involved at the early stages of design. The quicker you're there saying we can't look after that asset because we don't have the teams involved, or we can't use Johnson Controls because we're tied in with Carrier, whatever it is, you guys need to be there at the very beginning. And that's so important. And also, it informs realism when you're looking at your operational thereafter the project. Because it's okay, you build your model saying, oh, we're going to have 20,000 people living in this master development and it's going to be super green. How are you going to pay for that? You need to be realistic about how you're going to pay for that. So if you're at the beginning, you say, well, you start looking at your FM and your operational model, you say, well, do you know what? We can't afford to bring 20 trucks of TSC in every day. We can only do 10. You're going to have to scale back on your greening and your beautifying of the place and rethink things. But only you guys can bring that in. I think it's difficult when you're in a development that's brand new in a different country. This one in this area, I mean, even Qatar to an extent, we have that information available. And if we're planning on our fees for the tenants over a 30-year period, as maybe they do in Europe, when realistically it's only 10 years here, you have to keep that into consideration when you're looking at the design stage. So it's again being there at the very beginning of the process, not as it used to be in the construction market in the UK. As soon as the contract's finished, a big barrel of keys gets dropped off for the asset managers to come in and take over. It just doesn't work.
I'll be really quick. I'd say it's as simple as value the data and then go buy the data. You can go buy the data, so you either get it during the design and construction process, but you have to pay for it, it's not free, or if, as you say, you don't have it, you'll have to go serve it and go find it. You have to, if you want to get value from the data, you have to go buy the data. It is as simple as that. It's not someone's fault. You have to buy it. It has value.
There needs to be a lot more focus on whole life cost. If you look at the organizations now, mega development organization, generally speaking, the organization structure is quite consistent. Chief Development Officer in charge of design, Chief Execution Officer in charge of construction, and then if it's in-house managed, Chief Asset Management Officer. The objectives of Chief Development Officer and execution may not be aligned to the Chief Asset Management Officer. So the question is there a governance, overarching governance, that's focusing on the whole life cost to bring it all together to ensure that the Chief Information Officer or Chief Development Officer's decisions are not jeopardizing the remainder journey of the asset management?
Fantastic. Gentlemen, thank you very much. So for me, what I can say is you value the data, you need to value the people first.